darle la bienvenida a Melissa Marrero. Melissa, te doy el podio.
Gracias, Luis. Como dice Celia Cruz, mi español no es very good looking, so voy a hablar en inglés y español también, pero como Luis dice, yo soy abogada, solamente trabajo en los leyes de estate planning, probate and guardianship, tutela. Entonces, vamos a empezar. Gabriela, ¿puede ponerlo en can you go to the next slide, please?
Sí. Ok. ¿Pueden ver ahí la pantalla, por favor?
Sí.
Ok. Listo. Esta es la primera diapositiva. ¿La pueden ver?
Sí, can we go to the next one, number 2?
Ok.
Perfecto. So, just to introduce myself, Melissa Marrero, abogada con Lavender Greenberg PLLC. Nosotros solamente hacemos testamentos, fideicomisos, probate, y tutela, guardianships. I graduated from FIU College of Law, y I'm a big FIU lover. So, let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so vamos a empezar con what happens to real estate if someone passes away. ¿Qué sucede con los bienes cuando alguien fallece, pero sin testamento, sin fideicomiso? Okay, so next slide.
Algo así. Es
Primero, no will and no trust. ¿Qué pasa? Sin testamento, sin fideicomiso, ¿qué pasa? So, alguien que tiene un testamento, someone who has a will, se llama testate. Testate es como una palabra legal, un fancy word para decir que alguien hizo un
Ahí.
will. And there are a lot of people who pass away sin hacer nada, sin hacer will, sin hacer documentos. Entonces, we call that intestate, intestado, sin testamento. Gabriela, next, please. So, intestate, sin testamento, testate con testamento. Ok, próximo. So, what does intestate means? Means que cuando alguien se fallece, someone passes away sin testamento, what happens? We have to go to the court. We have to go to the court and we look at the Florida law. So, también someone can have a will, right? Pero puede ser que lo hicieron en ChatGPT o hicieron en la computadora o hicieron con un amigo, un accountant también. Yo sé accountants que lo hacen. Entonces, tú puedes tener un testamento, you can have a will, but sometimes the will is faulty. It's missing something. It's missing who the personal representative is going to be. Or it's missing your boat. You have a boat and you never devised it to anybody. So hay gente que pueden hacer que tienen un testamento, but we still have to go through intestacy because ese testamento no tiene algo. It's missing something, it's invalid. Okay, so just because you have a will doesn't necessarily mean that the will is 100% or excellent. I know hay mucha gente ahora con ChatGPT, AI, están haciendo los testamentos in the computer and it can create a disaster. But so intestate, testate, those are the two different words, los dos diferentes palabras que usamos en probate. Okay, next. So aquí en intestate succession es los leyes de Florida que qué pasa con las propiedades si alguien fallece sin un testamento. So on the left, izquierda es el spouse's share cuando tú estás casado y en el derecho es cuando no estás casado. So normalmente en Florida también hay muchos blended families, lo que yo digo. Algunas personas que tienen hijos con un matrimonio primero y después casan después con otra persona. So it's un blended family, children from a different marriage, you get married again. One of the most important things to know about that is si fallece sin testamento with a second spouse and children from the first marriage, it goes 50-50. Okay, that's a really big deal, especially con propiedades. Because what happens? If the children, let's say they don't get along with the stepmom or the stepdad, ahora they have to share ownership de una casa 50%. You either está viviendo con alguien que you don't talk to, o quieren hacer un buyout, ¿verdad? You want to buy out the other person's interest. Y ahora tienen fights de what's the value of the home. Puede ser que the stepmom thinks that the house is worth $500,000 y los hijos piensan que la casa es 200,000. So who wins here? How do you buy each other out? So it's very, very important for blended families to have estate plans. And then on the other hand, cuando no tiene un esposo o una esposa, and you just have kids, so 1, 2, 3, 4, as you go down, esos son los leyes de Florida. First, it goes to your kids. Second, it goes a los padres, madre y papá. And then it goes to your siblings, hermanas, hermanos. So it goes as, you know, as the rules lay out. Okay, next. So, hay gente que me dicen, Meli, yo tengo un testamento, así que estoy evitando the probate world. I don't have to go to court. Is that true, verdadero, or falso? And the answer is it's false, falso. A will is como coger a C+ in a test, right? A will is the first step. A will is really good to have, but it does not avoid the probate process. And that's one of the things that a lot of people are confused about. Cuando tú haces un testamento, yes, you're telling the judge, tú estás diciendo el mundo, yo quiero que mis bienes pasan a mi esposo, a mi hija, a una amiga. You can do whatever you want in a will. But you still have to go through the probate process con el corte, depositar el testamento, el juez tiene que decir, ok, está válido. Entonces, you still have to go through the process of transferring el título de los bienes a la gente que you put in the will. So, a will is great, okay? You don't have to look to the Florida law to tell you where it's going to go, but you still have to go through the probate process. It's very slow, it's very expensive. We'll talk about that in a couple slides. Next. So, como yo dijo, un testamento, it tells you exactly sus bienes y nombran un personal representative, todo eso, pero you still have to go through probate. So we'll go to the next slide. ¿Qué es la sucesión y cómo afecta los bienes inmuebles? So what is probate? Probate es el proceso de cuando tenemos que llevar el testamento o sin testamento, abrir un caso con el corte, y después decir, hacemos como un inventory, se llama. Y son todos los bienes que esa persona tenía en su nombre. Puede ser propiedades, puede ser cuenta de banco, puede ser segura de vida que no tiene un beneficiario. Todos esos bienes pasan por el probate. Entonces, el probate process es público. Ok, so todo el mundo puede entrar, mirar todos los bienes que esa persona tenía. También es información de la familia. So you can go and you can see who is the next heir, who is the next person who will be inheriting. Hay mucha gente que piensan, oh, you know, it's very rare que primos y tíos are beneficiaries. And I say the opposite. Yo tengo como de 30 casos, 10 van para los primos que they didn't even know who the person was, the person who died. So it's very, very common for cases to have 10, 15, 20 beneficiarios, and they're all inheriting, you know, these assets from the decedent. So next. Okay, vamos a ir al próximo que we already talked about what is probate. So what is the property that goes into probate? The most important thing to know is cuando tienen una cuenta de banco, tiene segura de vida, you have to put a beneficiary on the account. Very important. ¿Qué pasa? Cuando alguien tiene un beneficiario en la cuenta, if someone dies, tú llevas el certificado de función, you show your ID, and the bank automatically transfers the money to you. No probate needed. What happens when you don't have a beneficiary? That's what happens. You have to go through the probate process. So, todos los bienes que tienen en su nombre, houses, bank accounts, all of those kinds of assets, if you don't have a listed beneficiary, it ends up going through the probate process. Okay, next. Y como hablamos, probate muy lento ahora. It's taking about 6 to 8 months, which is a lot faster than before. Antes era como 2 años. So it's about 6 to 8 months for the assets to transfer to the beneficiaries. Hay solamente como 6 jueces, and there's thousands of people dying every day. Only 6 judges, so there's a lot of cases that the judges are going through. Probate es muy lento, costoso, and it's público, like I mentioned. Anybody can go in, look at a probate case, y saber de todo. They know the assets, they know how much you're getting, all of that stuff. Okay, so the next. So like I said, lento, costoso, pública, all of that. So, especially in the real estate world, yo quería hablar sobre un LLC. Hay mucha gente que, if you're a realtor or you're a person buying, it's very important to know the advantages, las ventajas de utilizar un LLC. Okay, vamos al próximo. What happens with an LLC? So with an LLC, there's a lot of liability protection. Cuando tú compras una casa en un LLC, it's important to know that you can be sued for anything. Hay gente en Miami que están haciendo demanda por cosas that you would think that you can't even sue, right? Un amigo, it's not even the landlord. Think of the friends of the land or of the tenant, right? The tenant is having a party, there's some friends over, and a friend of the tenant falls and sues the owner. Y ahora tenemos una demanda and it's suing the LLC. What are the protections of the LLC? Well, the LLC, you can only get what the LLC owns. What does that mean? That means on your worst day, si cojan una demanda de $1,000,000 and the house is only worth 500,000, the worst day that they can get is the house. They cannot go after you personally. No pueden coger los cuenta de banco personal. They can't go after all those things. If you have the house under your own name, right, they can go after you personally because they're suing the property owner. So it's important to determine when you want to purchase a property in your own name versus an LLC. And I always recommend an LLC para propiedades que son investments. Cuando tú estás alquilándolo, or you have even family members, you never know. A family member puede tener un amigo that's visiting, and the amigo is the one who does the demanda. So it's important to have that in mind when you are thinking about purchasing an investment property. Next slide. So, otra cosa que a lot of people ask me is, mira, ya yo tengo 3 propiedades, pero lo compré in 2005, right? Should I transfer my properties now into an LLC? What happens is, cuando hay un cambio en el título de a deed, when you change the deed and you're changing in ownership, right? So ahora el dueño de la casa is the LLC. It's no longer in my name, Melissa. The property appraiser's office, what a lot of people don't tell you is they do un reassessment. And that's horrible, right? For people que compraron una casa en 2005, they don't want to have a reassessment in 2025, especially with Miami-Dade. Todas las propiedades en Miami-Dade From COVID, they've probably doubled, right? So I always tell people, mira, if you had properties that you bought a long time ago, keep them the way that they are. Don't change them into an LLC. Even though there's a lot of protections con un LLC, keep it in your name. Y cojan un umbrella policy. An umbrella policy will cover you in the event que hay una demanda muy grande and that you can get covered. Sometimes you have to just weigh the benefits, right? Comprar la propiedad bajo de un LLC versus transferring it later. It depends on whether the impuestos, the taxes that you're going to pay, is worth the protections that you're going to get. Okay? So next. Right. So you have to weigh the benefits, los beneficios of the protections versus the inconvenience of having a new reassessment. Okay, next. So now we're going to talk about revocable trust, un fideicomiso revocable. That's one of the hardest words I've had to learn since becoming a lawyer. Fideicomiso revocable. And then a ladybird deed. Some people have heard of it, some people have not. A lot of people are, oh, you know, I've heard of a trust. Is it better than a will? Is it stronger? Does it protect against creditors? Mucha gente piensa que if I change my assets to un trust, nadie me puede hacer una demanda, which is not true. But a trust is what a lot of people are doing because of the following. Let's go to the next slide. So a trust is private, number one. Como probate era público, trusts are private. Si alguien fallece y tiene un trust, los bienes van a pasar in the trust. And the trustee, el fideicomisario, the person that you put in charge, is going to then transfer all the assets according to what your trust says. Your trust can say a lot of things. Puede aguantar los bienes para a certain time, right? You can have 10 beneficiaries, you can have 2 beneficiaries, and the assets can transfer when, vamos a decir, cuando mi hijo llega a 24, yo quiero que, I want 50% to be distributed. Cuando llegas a 30, the other 50% gets distributed. So with trusts, you can be very creative, okay? And it doesn't go through the probate process. It basically avoids probate, what we're queremos hacer, right? You never want to go into court and have to pay all of these attorney's fees. And then we make sure that el título de la casa, maybe not your homestead, but other kinds of assets like bank accounts and life insurance and things like that are in the name of the trust. So nothing is in your individual name, everything is in the name of your trust. Now, ladybird deed is another cost-effective way to transfer real property. So si tienes una propiedad and you know, yo quiero dejar esta casa a mi hija, right? You can put in the deed, you change the deed, right? And you put a life estate in my name. And when I die, it automatically goes to my daughter, okay? You can do that, pero one of the problems with that is, ¿qué pasa si la persona que tú pusiste como el remainder has died, right? So you don't have the contingent beneficiary. If I put my friend and cuando yo fallezco, my friend is no longer here, then we're back to square one. Es diferente como un fideicomiso, que un fideicomiso puede tener un contingent beneficiary. Si esta persona no está aquí, yo quiero la casa que baja mi another friend, right? So it's very easy, it's very simple, the ladybird deeds. It's a lot cheaper, but sometimes it doesn't cover everything that you need. And that's okay. You know, so, I do a lot of ladybird deeds all the time. It's just if something happens to that person, you just want to make sure que están cambiando, revisando. You're always on top of your estate plan as life moves on. Okay? So next slide. Okay, so what is a fideicomiso revocable? How does it work? So basically, you get with a lawyer who does estate planning and you create a trust. Tú vas a decir who is the fideicomisario, quién son los beneficiarios. You're going to go through all of that. And then once you sign, right, you're going to sign it, it's going to be effective. Then you're going to start putting your assets in your trust. That's the most important part. Yo siempre dice, tú puedes tener un fideicomiso, pero si el fideicomiso no tiene bienes, es un papel, right? It's worth nothing. So you want to put all your trusts, you want to put all your assets in your trust. And so when you fund that, if something happens to you, the trustee takes over and the trustee then decides, according to what your trust says, how things are going to pass. Okay? And a lot of people have questions about creditor protection. Si alguien me hace una demanda and I transfer my assets to a trust, I'm protected. The answer is no. And as far as taxes, no cambian los impuestos, right? So it's going to be as if it's you're going to file your taxes normally. Nothing changes in your taxes. You're going to use your social security number y todo eso. Okay, and the next one. So homestead. Homestead is very important. It has a lot of derechos especiales that a lot of people don't know. If you go to the next slide, please, just to go briefly. Homestead, yo puedo hablar in Homestead for like 30 minutes, but just to summarize it, it has 3 different protections. One is the 3% cap de impuestos. You know, every year solamente your property can only go up 3%, 3%. In COVID, it was very important for homestead exemption because properties were going super high and a property appraiser can only go up 3%. You're also creditor protected. El homestead is, like Lewis was saying, one of your biggest assets. Normalmente, everybody has a house and then they have, they put all their money in a house. We know how expensive houses can be. So when you have a home, it's protected from most of your creditors. There's only 3 people that can make you sell your house, and that's la hipoteca, the mortgage, IRS, como siempre, and then construction lien. So if you did a house, you did your roof, and you didn't pay the roofer, they can put a lien on your house. Those are the only 3 people that can force your house to be sold, which is super, super important. Because if you want a lot of asset protection, if you're thinking about, soy un doctor, yo soy una abogada, and I can get sued very easily, you want to know that your homestead is always protected. Okay, next. So the same there, just what I went through, mortgage on the property, liens, IRS. Those are really the only people that can force you to sell your house. Next. And then there's restrictions on who you can leave your homestead to. It's very important that you speak with an estate planning lawyer. If you have hijos menores, you cannot devise to anybody. So if you have a child que es menor que de 18 años, you can't even leave it to your kid, which is crazy, right? If you have a spouse, you cannot leave it to anybody except your spouse. So there are very, very specific rules when you are doing a will and you are picking somebody to receive your homestead, okay? And then we'll talk about impuestos. I think that's the last topic. Next. and then impuestos. I think one of the most important things that a lot of people don't know, especially as a real estate agent or a foreign investor, is when you sell to foreign investors versus American citizens. So let's go to the next one. When someone dies, so a lot of people are like, oh, do I have to pay? Tengo que pagar impuestos cuando yo fallezco? You know, does the government take all my money? Things like that. So this is the law. The law is with the federal government, si eres ciudadano, you have an exemption de 13 millones de dólares. Y eso es todos los bienes que tiene. Si tiene una casa en Perú, otra casa en New York, if you get all of your assets combined, you have an exemption de $13 million, okay? What happens if you pass away with more than that? If you pass away with more, you have to pay impuestos de 40%, and they're due in 9 meses. So if you have the cash or not, you're going to have to sell something to get the cash to pay in 9 months. And you're probably thinking, Mel, 13 millones de dólares, that's ridiculous. You're the 1%. And it's true. A lot of people don't even have 5 million, right? But this fluctuates. So 5 years ago, the law, or 10 years ago, the law was only 5 million. Now, when Trump got into presidency, he changed it. He put it at 13 million. If, you know, next year or the next president wants to change it, he can put it down to 5 million. And it's very important porque los propiedades en Miami, you have 3 properties and you're casi está en millón y medio, you know? So it can add up very fast, and it's very important to know when the laws change. And then next. And so this is the most important. I know hay mucha gente que vienen de otros países y quieren comprar una casa aquí. A foreign investor, inverso extranjero, I think that's how you say it, they don't have the same rights as a ciudadano. When they die, they only get $60,000, $60,000. So si compran una casa en su nombre y fallecen con, and the houses worth, tienen un valor de 100,000, you have to pay up to 40% impuestos on the other $40,000. So here in the screen, I did an example. Let's do the ciudadano first. Ciudadano. Let's say a ciudadano died with 15 million, tiene que pagar impuestos on the 1.4. That's over the 13.6. But a foreign investor, si él fallece con una casa en su nombre y el valor de la casa is $1 million, you're paying almost 40% taxes on $940,000. So yo tenía un caso que un señor compré una casa en 2000, yo creo que era 2010, y falleció uno like 2023. So ya la casa, it was like triple the price. It was about $1 million. And he was not a resident. He was not a citizen. And they ended up having to they had to sell the house como un fast, quick sale para coger el dinero, pagar impuestos en como $500,000, and then they had to pay it in 9 months. So it was a little bit crazy, and it's a really important thing to know. If you know que your client is a foreign investor who's not a citizen, who's not a resident, there are other ways that they can buy a property, ponerlo en un LLC o una compañía, un foreign trust, things like that can avoid this problem. And then the last thing we'll talk about is incapacity documents. Son documentos de incapacidad. These are like living documents. So wills, trust, all of that stuff es cuando alguien se fallece, what happens. Pero documentos de incapacidad son documentos vivos, what happens right now. So if you can go to the next slide, there's 5 different documents. Siempre están incluidos en nuestro paquete de trust. So it's always included in our trust package. and they're living documents. It's what happens while you are still alive, pero está incapacidad. So you have bills to pay, la hipoteca, you're in the hospital, you're doing a procedure. Es muy importante a poner una persona que puede tomar decisiones por ustedes when you're going through the hospital procedure, things like that. Even if it's minor, you know. Yo tenía un caso que era un blended family y los hijos querían que la mamá hiciera this kind of procedure with this doctor. Y la mamá estaba casado with a second marriage y el señor quería hacer algo diferente. So the doctor was like, who do I listen to? I don't know if it's the kids, if it's the husband. Y ella no tenía estos documentos. So you have to go to court. Can get very ugly, right? You start fighting and it's very costoso. So it's important not only to think of qué vas a pasar con mis bienes cuando yo fallezco, pero también qué vas a pasar con todo que yo tengo que pagar. Everything medical decisions, financial decisions while I'm still living and I'm here and I'm just going through some kind of procedure at the hospital. So that is estate planning. You know, I try to incorporate some of the tips and some of the concerns that I see a lot of people have when they are realtors in the real estate world. You know, any kind of questions that you guys have, we can have them now.
Gracias, Melissa. Si alguien tiene una pregunta, por favor, déjeme saber para hacer el unmute. ¿Sabes qué? Voy a unmute. Oh. Un momentito.
Ya.
Ya, perfecto.
Hola, buenos días. Para los que tengan preguntas, pueden quitar el mute para...
Sí, por favor. Morning. Si estoy viendo aquí, están preguntando, how can we get a copy of Melissa's presentation? Vamos a, una vez haya terminado la presentación, le vamos a mandar una copia de la presentación para que puedan entonces verla una vez más y compartirla. En el chat hemos incluido la información de Melissa González si alguien quiere comunicarse con Melissa para agenciar una consulta, entonces su información está en el chat. ¿Alguna pregunta?
Nosotros hacemos como 30 minutos de una consulta gratis, miramos todo que tienes y hacemos como un recommendation. Si necesitas un fideicomiso, si hay propiedades que necesitan LLCs, cosas así.
Excelente. Bueno, si no hay preguntas, les agradezco a todos haber venido y participado. Muy educativo. Muchas gracias, Melissa, por toda esa información. Vuelvo y repito, la información de Melissa está en el chat por si quieren comunicarse con Melissa directamente. Gracias por venir. Muy interesante, muy educativo. Y cualquier pregunta que tengan, ya sea de la parte legal o por supuesto aquí en Caspitin Realty si tiene que ver con bienes raíces, compra, ventas, renta y administración de propiedades, estamos a sus órdenes. Mi nombre es Luis Castillo, Emma Pilarte, somos parte del equipo y estamos para ayudarle en todo lo que son sus necesidades de bienes raíces. Muchas gracias, Melissa, y pasen muy buen día.
Gracias, que tengan un buen día. Bye.
Bye.